It may sound fancy, but coq au vin, or rooster with wine, is a classic French dish that isn't as complicated as it sounds. It's just a simple one-pot wonder full of layered flavors of stewed chicken, bacon, onions, mushrooms, and red wine. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of Let's Celebrate TV. I'm your host, Peter Lee. Today, we're making a great chicken dish. We're making coq au vin. Sounds fancy, huh? What is coq au vin? Coq au vin literally translates to rooster with wine. Now the story goes that it's a French dish, and they would use a rooster that was past his prime of roostering, shall we say. And of course, a free-range bird like that would be tough and stringy, so they would have to stew it a long time in what else but red wine with herbs and vegetables. We don't have to stew it for a long time, but we are going to use some red wine. This is the beginning of coq au vin. Now what is this and how did I get here? This is just 8 chicken thighs. That's what I'm using today. You could also cut up your own chicken. I find using the thighs is easier. All I did was last night I trimmed them of the excess fat and skin, put them in this nice heavy duty zip top bag, and then I added a bunch of parsley, fresh thyme, and a couple of bay leaves. Then the wine. I poured in an entire 750 ml bottle of dry red wine. I say dry red wine, I mean a Cabernet Sauvignon, Burgundy, which is traditional, maybe a Pinot Noir, but something dry, not sweet. Then I popped this in the fridge overnight. And here we are, so let's get cooking. First thing we had to do today was I preheated my oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 165 Celsius. Now I have a nice big Dutch oven here. If you don't have a Dutch oven, I can leave you a link for an affordable one that we'd like. In the meantime, if you don't have a Dutch oven, you could use a nice cast iron frying pan that's deep, that has a lid that's oven proof, or stainless steel, as long as everything is oven proof. I'm gonna turn the heat on. We're gonna start off with some bacon. I have here 4 strips of what in the UK they would call streaky bacon. It's about 6 ounces or 190 grams. Now I just cut these into little lardoons. This is just gonna help it render out and crisp up better. It's right in the pan. We're gonna just let this go crispy. It's gonna take 8 to 10 minutes. It's been about 8 minutes. My bacon cooked a little faster than I thought, so I'm gonna cut the heat. I don't want it to go much darker than this because it'll keep cooking. I'm gonna use my slotted spoon. I'm gonna scoop it out, and it's rendered some lovely drippings. Now, let's start talking about this chicken. We're gonna need to remove this from this bag, and we want to pat it dry. So let me get some tongs, because I wouldn't want to touch raw chicken with my bare hands more than I have to. Plus I'll get wine on my hands. So here we go, we're just gonna fish this out. Now, look at that color. It's rather sinister looking, isn't it? I'm just gonna lay this out, and don't worry if you get some of the herbs with it, it's perfectly fine. It's all going back in the pot. My chicken is out. I'm gonna reserve this. Do not throw this out. I know you've always been taught once you marinate meat, throw it out. Don't. I'm just gonna put this back here in this bowl so it doesn't spill. Let that hang out for right now. Now let's take some paper towels, pat it dry. Pretty simple. All right, now it's time to start cooking some chicken. We want to lightly dredge it in some flour. So I have here a good amount of flour, just seasoned with salt and pepper. Now I'm looking at my bacon drippings. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more oil to this. You'll have to judge that depending on how much your bacon renders out. I wouldn't add more than a tablespoon, which is 15 mils. I'm not even gonna add that much. This is just plain olive oil, but I want just a little bit more in there. We're going to lightly dredge the chicken, and then we're gonna brown it. We're gonna do it in batches. And the reason we're browning it is because it's going to add flavor. It's going to help thicken the sauce at the end. And it's gonna be lovely. Right in. My chicken is all browned. I did it in batches and then I put them all right back in the pan. You may want to check if you need to take out any extra grease. I really didn't have any. So I've turned off the pan, and now comes the fun part. I have here 4 ounces, 120 mils of brandy, and I've got a lighter. I'm gonna pour it in and flambe it. Use extreme caution for this. Sometimes it goes whoosh and you get a great big giant flame. Sometimes you just get a little poof. But just be careful. Use common sense. And we have a lovely little flame. And that's great. There we go. All right. Now we're just gonna let this burn off, but you see why I said extreme caution. If you have a low sitting hanging hood for your vent over your stove, you wouldn't want to do this. So what does having the brandy flame do? It burns off the alcohol, but it leaves that caramelized flavor from the brandy. It gives just an extra layer of flavor. You can skip this step, but I think you'll like it better if you do it. Our flame has died down. Let's add a few more ingredients to this. Remember that bacon we cooked and we saved? Here it is. It's going right back in the pan. Oh, crispy. Next up, onions. I've got 2 medium onions, just roughly chopped, right in. Next is my favorite, garlic. I've got 3 cloves. You can use 2 to 3 cloves, whatever you like. Roughly chopped again. None of this has to be perfect. This is not high chef cuisine. Next, this is traditional and it's delicious. Mushrooms. I have 5 ounces of cremini mushrooms here that I've just sliced up. You can use white button mushrooms. You can use whatever you like. This is 5 ounces, 150 grams. Again, right in the pot. Next, for a little sweetness, little depth of flavor, I got 2 carrots that I just diced up. Plain old carrots, nothing fancy. Now we want to add a little liquid to help all this come together. I'm going to start with some chicken stock. I have some here. This is a cup, 8 ounces, 240 mils, ordinary chicken stock. Now remember that marinade that we're saving? Let's pull this up. Now remember, this is a whole bottle. Doesn't look like it here, but this is a whole bottle of marinade. First thing I'm gonna do is fish out some of these herbs because they're not done yet. We need to have their flavor, so we're gonna just scatter them in. Now I'm gonna pour in enough marinade to make sure everything is covered. You can arrange things in your pot if you need to. You may not need this whole bottle of wine, and then again you may. It's all gonna depend on the size of your pot and how much chicken you're cooking. And I think we're gonna need it all. There we go. One last parsley in there. At this point, I'm going to give it a little bit of salt and pepper. Now I know there's bacon in there, but we've added a lot of liquid and all these vegetables are gonna release all of their water and juices. So we're gonna need a good pinch of salt and a good grinding of pepper. Just like that. Now, I'm going to cover this. And I'm going to crank the heat up on this on high. And we're going to heat this for 5 minutes. Why? I want to get all the liquid inside warmed up, and I want to give things a head start cooking. Well, after 5 minutes, we're going to pop this in the oven, which is 325, 165 Celsius, and we're going to let it go for 45 minutes. But heating is first will help the cooking process because I don't want to put cold liquid into a hot oven. It's been 45 minutes. We're out of the oven. A couple more steps to go. First, let's take a look at this. Ooh, wow. Smells heavenly. But we're not yet done. I want to add a little more flavor and texture. So now I'm going to add a bag, 14 ounces, 408 grams of frozen pearl onions. You can use fresh, but I prefer the frozen, much easier to do. Pour this in, and we're just going to give it a stir to mix them around a bit. Ooh. Now we're going to go back to the oven. I'm going to leave this uncovered, and we're just going to put it back in the oven for an additional 15 minutes. That's going to get these onions cooked. It's going to help the sauce thicken a little bit, and it's just going to help bring it all together. And here we are out of the oven. It's been 15 minutes. The onions are cooked. It looks wonderful. It smells heavenly. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is try and fish out some of these herbs. Like here's a bay leaf, and here's some parsley. This is looking good and smelling divine, but I want to gild the lily, if you will. I want this sauce to be a little thicker, a little richer, believe it or not. And we're gonna do that by using something called a Beurre Manie. What is a Beurre Manie? This is a Beurre Manie. A Beurre Manie is simply equal parts of soft butter and flour. In this case, I used 2 tablespoons of butter, or 29 grams it weighed out to, along with 2 tablespoons of flour, which was about 15 grams. And I just smushed it together with a fork and rolled it up into a little ball. I'm going to use most of this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and use all of it. You may not need to. You can start with a little bit at a time. But this is pretty loose, so I'm going to put it all in. Now we're going to give this a stir. I'm going to break this up, and it'll start melting all on its own. And the residual heat will thicken this sauce. So now we get to do what I always tell you to do. You take something out of the oven, you gotta let it rest. Here we are. It's been 5 minutes, 5 long, agonizing minutes. But I have to tell you, this smells utterly incredible. I'm gonna give it a little stir. I've given it a few stirs while we're waiting. But look at it. It's beautiful. Now I'm gonna take a little bit out, make myself a little plate. Piece of chicky. Like that. Here's another one. A little hungry. Right there. Look at that. Now, how could you serve this? If I were entertaining, I would serve this over a big bed of mashed potatoes or buttered noodles. But here we are. It's our favorite time now. Let's give it a little taste. I can cut a little piece off right here. Ooh, tender, falling off the bone. Very hot. Wow. It's rich, it's luxurious. You get the wine, you get the brandy, and you get all those complex flavors from those vegetables, the double onions, the garlic, all the herbage in there. It's just amazing. It's just wonderful. Now, before I take another bite, a little sip of wine. Again, Cabernet Sauvignon in here, Cabernet Sauvignon in here. All right, we will see you on Tuesdays for our regular episodes, Fridays for Cocktail Fridays, and every other Sunday for our live streams. Now, while I go and have a few private moments with this plate of food, I'm going to ask you to watch some of these videos over here. Till next time, cheers.